be available out on the PERC website. Hi, I'm Carrie Buss. I am here today on behalf of PERC to welcome our speaker, Laurel. You know what? I don't know how to say. Is it Biver?
It's actually Beaver.
Beaver. Okay. She is a suicide prevention specialist in the Center for Suicide Prevention and Research and a mental health counselor in the Behavioral Health Department at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Laurel has been at Nationwide for 10 years and in the mental health field for 24 years, working with multiple populations. She has particular interest in working with schools and community organizations to increase awareness of suicide and help others understand how we can all prevent suicide in our youth. We're really excited to have her here today to give this presentation on behalf of PERC. Before we get started, I wanted to just give a little bit of administrative information. First of all, there are several things coming up. Number one, this presentation will be given again tonight at 7 o'clock. So if you find it to be helpful, please do spread the word amongst people you know. And the link for the presentation this evening is also available on our PERC website. Also, there are several things coming down the pipeline. Some of them are through, we're kind of promoting on behalf of Dublin City Schools. There's one about being overloaded in the COVID context. That's on November 16th. There is one on parent involvement in sports. That's November 30th. There's another worry time on December 7th. And there's one on December 1st, that is caring for yourself while caring for others. And that one is in partnership with Centero. The others are different organizations that will be putting those on. All of this information, I think, is available on our website. And if not there, we have sent it out via our distribution, and we can get it on our website if it's not there. Speaking of our distribution, if you are not receiving emails from us and you would like to, please send an email to volunteer@percdublin.org, and we will definitely get you on our distribution list so that you're kept informed about upcoming speakers and other opportunities. I'd ask that after this presentation, you also go over to our website, my favorite place to send you. And there is a tab to fill out an evaluation form. Just let us know what you thought of today's presentation and if you have ideas or thoughts about any other possible presentations. And the only other thing I would say is if you're interested in helping us select speakers, if you have ideas, we have a monthly meeting and we'd love to see you there. You don't have to start at the beginning of the year or come to all of them. You can come to just one or however many floats your boat. That information about what days those meetings are is also on the website, and there is a Zoom link that will be posted the week of the meeting so that you can join us since everything's virtual right now. So with all that administrative stuff out of the way, I will turn it over to Laurel. Oh, one more thing, sorry. I forgot to tell you, I will be moderating the chat. So any questions or comments that you want to throw there, that's fine. Also, Laurel really likes an interactive presentation. So don't feel like you have to stay on mute. You can jump in and ask her any questions at any time. If you prefer that your questions remain more confidential in nature, you're welcome to send them directly to me in the chat feature. And then I'm happy to pose those questions on behalf of the group. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Laurel now.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I've been very excited about this. This is such an important topic, and luckily, as we were speaking earlier, that this is becoming more of a common thing people are talking about, but it's not still being talked about enough, and we need to continue to get the word out there. The more that we can model talking about this, the better. It's showing our kids that this is not something that they need to be fearful of talking about. This is how people get help for them or their friends. So let me go ahead and put my slides up. I'm not sure if I actually am going to, if you're going to see me at all or my slides. Do you know which one about that?
We can see you on the side. It kind of depends on how people set up their screens, but I think there is the option to do that.
All right, perfect. Well, so what I'd like to do today is talk about suicide prevention, and really thinking about, what do we need to consider as our kids are growing up, how we need to talk with them, what we need to be able to do and say to have them feel comfortable coming to us. And then as they start to approach leaving our homes or finishing high school and going on to the next steps in life, what are some of the things that we need to consider? What are some of the things that we can do to help them? Because this is such a sensitive topic, we've all been touched by suicide in some form or another. Most of us have. We at least hear about it. And I want everybody to feel like they can take care of themselves. I know that being Zoom, we can't see each other necessarily, but if you need to get up and take a break during the presentation, please do so. Caring for yourself is very important. I want to go into a little bit of detail about the program that I work for at Nationwide Children's Hospital. We're called the Center for Suicide Prevention and Research. And what our role in the community is we actually go to schools and help schools put suicide prevention programs in place. And while we're there, we also help do assessment if there are kids that need have concerns for suicide. And then also we have caseloads that we see clients on our own, and then also postvention. So in the community, if there is a tragedy, we're available for anyone to reach out to us, schools, organizations, individuals, whoever it is. And we help think about how to take steps after a suicide may have occurred. Another important thing that we're doing, like we're doing right now, is this gatekeeper training. So really getting out there and helping adults know how to talk to their kids, actually helping them know what the things are to look for, to help them grow their awareness of what might be going on with their kids or their kids' friends. It's important that we reduce stigma and build more awareness around mental health. And then also really help people understand and identify what the supports there are in their homes, in their communities, whatever it is, and help talk about what kind of coping strategies to use. I'm going to kind of hit on a lot of these today, not in depth, but we'll be getting to most of these. And then we also really want to highlight the connection and values and reasons for living. We want kids and adults to really understand how to promote that, how to really understand what there is in someone's life. Our mission statement is that we engage each community member so they can understand their role in preventing youth suicide. Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is up front, we're going to just kind of get a conceptualization of what's going on in the country. So what is going on with youth suicide and depression? What are the local and national statistics around that? What are the warning signs and risk factors that we need to be paying attention to? Then from there, we're going to learn how to support suicide prevention in our homes, in our community. We want to make sure that we're supporting a culture that values youth mental health and doesn't shame that. We want to be able to help parents understand how to talk to not only their kids about suicide, but also working with the schools or organizations where our kids are involved. Make sure that we have everybody that needs to be aware of what's going on to help safeguard our kids the best we can. Then at the end, we'll have some question and answer time. So to begin, I just want to look at what the actual definitions for suicide. So suicide is dying by suicide, is someone who takes their life with the intention to die. So it's some people worry that like a overdose may not be suicide. It could be someone using drugs, but they didn't overdose with the intention to die. That intent is the main factor when it comes to suicide. Suicide attempts are someone trying to kill themselves, but it may not actually result in injury. And we're going to look at some statistics in a little bit about how often there are actual attempts, and what we can actually learn by that is by us actually becoming more aware, we can actually reduce that number of attempts. Suicidal ideation is a formal way of just saying someone who's thinking about or considering or planning suicide. And then self-injury, I want to mention this. It's self-injury in itself is not a suicidal concern. What we want to pay attention to with self-injury is it's someone harming themselves, but not necessarily with the intent to die. If they're doing something, cutting or some kind of form of self-injury, there's a lot of different reasons why kids do that. Most of the time it's without the intention to die. We do really want to pay attention to that though, because if people start to use physical harm as a way to cope with their pain, cope with problems, that can lead to more acts of physical harm and could be a precursor to suicide. No matter what, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to it. It needs attention and it needs treatment just as much as depression or suicide attempts. So specifically, youth suicide is very prevalent these days. It's the second leading cause of death in our kids. From the ages 10 to 24, it's the second leading cause of death. And it used to be 10-year-olds were not in that list. Those younger kids, it was not a second leading cause of death. It is increasing recently. When you're looking at physical conditions, leading causes of death with kids in general, here are a list of the 6 major leading causes of death with kids. And what is frightening about this is if you add all the kids that die from these medical conditions, it doesn't even add up to the amount of kids that die each year from suicide. So we, in our communities, luckily, people take medical conditions very seriously and put a lot of research dollars into physical conditions and medical conditions that need research. Unfortunately, there isn't nearly as much research dollars that go towards suicide prevention. So we need to help people understand that there's more dollars that need to be spent that way as well. I started to mention with the younger kids. So even children under 12 years old plan an attempt and actually complete suicide. It's the second leading cause of death for 12-year-olds. It's the 8th leading cause of death for children under 12. This slide is just a little outdated by a couple months, where now 10-year-olds have just recently, this last year, increased to second leading cause of death. But you can see the trend. People believe that kids don't understand what suicide is. They don't understand that taking their lives is actually going to happen. What we need to pay attention to with this is that when our kids are in pain, they don't necessarily think about the consequences later on. That's a little bit more of a mature way of thinking. What we know is that kids feel pain and they just want it to end. And so they also do attempt suicide. 9 and 10-year-olds in a recent study have shown rates of suicidal ideation were 6% and attempts were actually 1%. So these numbers are real when it comes to our younger kids as well, which just illustrates the point that we need to be talking sooner to our kids about these concerns. We need to help open up the conversation, open up the ability for kids to come forward and talk about it when they're experiencing some type of emotional pain. and supporting them with that. And we're going to talk more about that later.
Hey, Laurel, I
Yeah.
thought that slide that you showed with the number of deaths, I think, yeah, the one right before, I had no idea that was, I just did not realize that was how that laid out. That's really scary to see those figures presented. So I just wanted to comment on the fact that I think that's shocking. And I feel bad that as a parent, I didn't even know it was so prevalent like that.
With the second leading cause of death.
Yeah, I mean, and just looking at, I think about cancer being something that, strikes so much fear in the heart of a parent that could happen to your kid. And then you compare it to what suicide looks like. And it's just amazing to see how it's very stark.
It is. It's horrifying. And this is the number of suicide deaths that's being reported here, not even the number of attempts that are happening. So we'll get into what those numbers look like in a minute. But as you think about the attention that's gone to these medical concerns, or think about how our community responded to death by accident. So that's the first leading cause of death, deaths by accidents. And our communities and country really mobilized at reducing the number of automobile deaths, right? We put in restraints, we have car seats, we have increased age before someone's able to get their license. They go through a waiting period now where all of that has been new over the last years. I don't know how many years, and that has made a significant drop in the amount of deaths caused by car accidents. And so we know it can be done. We know that we can put measures in place to decrease rates of death. And this needs to be prioritized just like that. So let's talk about depression and suicide among high school students. We looked at it with the younger kids. This is looking at so if you look at the average classroom of 30 kids, 12% have felt so sad or hopeless for 2 weeks or more that they stopped doing some usual activity. That is a definition of depression. So out of 30 kids in a classroom, 12 of them are displaying those symptoms. Nationwide, this isn't a given year. These statistics are from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that's done every 2 years by the CDC. And so 37% of our kids nationwide in high school have felt so sad or hopeless for 2 weeks or more that they stopped doing something they normally enjoy. 6 in a classroom of 30 have actually seriously considered attempting suicide. 5 of the students actually have made a suicide attempt. So talked earlier about how those numbers that we saw were the reported deaths, but 5 people out of 30 are actually making a plan, and 3 of those 30 have actually attempted suicide. So if you think of a typical classroom, I like to put it in the 30 students because you think about, statistics of 9%. What does that even look like? But if you're looking at 30 kids, our classrooms are typically around 30. These numbers are really significant. I know that all is very heavy and difficult to hear. It's important to hear and important to realize, but I do also want to point out that suicide is preventable with treatment and with coming together as a community and nation and really looking at what we need to see the warning signs are and help getting support for our kids in the right way. And treatment doesn't always mean therapy. It can mean a lot of different things, which I'll get into more later as well. So I'll start with some of the facts. People that are depressed and use alcohol or other drugs are at greater risk for suicide. Why is that? Alcohol adds to a person's depression. And when someone is under the influence of alcohol or drugs, it adds to making poor decisions. They're not thinking things through the same way that they normally would. It increases the chance that someone's going to act on suicidal thoughts if they have them. Alcohol is the #1 drug used by teenagers, and 75% of, well, actually, if a child is depressed, it increases their risk of suicide by 75%. I want to start going into some of the risk factors. The top 3 risk factors for suicide are depression, and that's why all those slides before were really looking at that. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about depression in a minute. Alcohol and drug abuse, and then previous attempts. Some people believe that, okay, great, you know, we've determined that someone's really struggling, they're depressed, they've made an attempt, we got them to the hospital, we're getting them care. That doesn't then stop the concern. We need to continue to be vigilant with these kids. For the first year, the numbers are high that there could be a reattempt. And so we need to be looking at the other protective factors that we need to put in place for these kiddos. Other risk factors for suicide are psychological aspects. So if someone's feeling down and negative, if they're feeling lonely, if they start acting differently than they normally do, acting out against others, being bullied, or bullying others, both of those are things that increase the risk for suicide. Biological considerations, gender. So boys that attempt suicide are more likely to die by suicide. Girls are more likely to attempt but not die by suicide as often. And that typically has to do with what means they're using to try to kill themselves. And unfortunately, boys tend to use more lethal means like guns. Just recently, there has been an increase in death by suicide. The greatest population that's increasing is in girls between 10 and 14. And why is that? They're starting to use more lethal means. Typically, girls are more likely to use something like drugs as an overdose. And with drugs being used, we can actually go in and save them. It's easier to catch that and reverse those effects. Unfortunately, a lot of teens are moving towards using something like some type of asphyxiation, hanging or something, or a bag or something like that over their head. And so that's increasing their death rate significantly these days. I want to really mention here also about LGBTQ identities. It's not that they're LGBTQ that puts them at greater risk, it's the distress related to being LGBTQ and maybe not getting the support they need, not being recognized. The greatest concern is if their families are not supporting them or really honoring who they are. And then of course, genetics. It's a genetic. When someone has depression, it's possible that's a family issue, being either by heredity and or just by the experience of being around somebody. They're actually doing some research on, in vitro kind of experiencing depression if a parent has depression, both male and female, not just the mother. And then the last area of risk factors that I want to mention are environmental implications. So I've alluded to this quite a bit. What's the access kids have to things to attempt suicide. If we suspect our child is having some type of depression and or suicidal thinking, we need to be really vigilant about making sure that our house is safety proofed, that we're paying attention to where our kids are going, if there are things in the other people's homes or areas they're going that something can use to harm themselves. If there's a history of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, that also increases the risk that someone may attempt suicide. I mentioned earlier about bullying. A lot of people are surprised to hear that bulliers, people that actually bully other people, are at greater risk of suicide. Why do you think that is? Do you think those kids could be feeling good about themselves if they're doing that to somebody else? And then knowing someone that's died by suicide is also a risk factor, whether it's somebody in the family, community. We're seeing that even celebrities that our kids identify with, that can increase the risk. Particularly if there is a suicide in the school or community that's age range of your child. That is something called contagion, suicide contagion, which it's interesting. It's not necessarily even the kids that are the closest to those kids that die by suicide. It's more, so it opens up the option. It opens up the idea that that is a way that someone can get out of the pain that they're experiencing.
Hey, Laurel, someone in the chat asked, will talking about suicide increase the tendency for suicide to be committed?
That's a wonderful question. And it's a really, people consider that quite a bit. I actually have a slide about that in a little bit, but no, absolutely not. What we have found is there is absolutely no evidence that shows that talking about suicide leads someone to attempt suicide or have suicidal thoughts. It's actually the opposite. What it does is it opens up the opportunity for your child to actually talk about it and get some support and get some help. Someone that is struggling with suicidal thoughts, they may not want to talk about it. They might want not to bring it up to other people, but when asked, it can be a huge relief because then it opens the door for them to be able to talk about it. I want to spend a little bit more time on depression. I just want you to take a minute and think, what does depression look like to you? If you think about someone that's depressed, what do they look like? How do they act? We know that it's when there's major changes for 2 weeks or more in several different areas of someone's life. So what's going on physically? What's going on with their thoughts? How are they feeling? How are they acting? All of those play a role. And, I always think back, I'm probably dating myself a little bit here, but there used to be a commercial on TV about someone that had depression, and there's like a big scribble ball over their head as they walked. It was like a cloud. And, they walk with hunched over and not looking happy. Depression does have physical symptoms with it. Bodies will hurt, change in appetite, change in weight, change in sleep. Those types of things actually happen. The thoughts have a very negative aspect to them. Nothing seems to be going well. Nothing's right. Nothing's
in the chat. Sorry, Laurel. In the chat, people were saying, like they don't have any motivation to do anything. They might sleep a lot. They'd be quiet, not sharing with the family.
Perfect. Thank you so much for adding that. Yes, absolutely. And so their behaviors, withdrawing, not being part of things as much, socially with their friends or at home, and not being able to actually focus or concentrate is a big piece. People don't realize that. I mean, what's going on is our, depression is in our brain, right? So it's an organ, and there are changes that are going on in that physical organ, and people can't concentrate. They can't focus the way they normally do. So at schools, it's a really important place to be able to see that too in the classroom. If someone's not actually doing the work that they need to do, not getting things turned in, it's not because maybe they don't care, or maybe they just forgot. Or if they're feeling so down and sad and feeling like they don't want to live, is it really going to matter that their homework assignment is turned in? We don't know about that.
Hey, Laurel, do we think and I don't know if there's an answer to this question, but during COVID, with so many schools being remote or hybrid, are we missing people because teachers, I assume, are getting this type of training to be on the lookout? And maybe in a family, I know sometimes it's harder to see things in your own kids, especially if you're seeing them every day, and it's harder to see changes when you're around someone all the time. Do you feel like this COVID experience is making it harder to find and screen?
It's definitely increasing concern. Yes, I mean, hopefully, and particularly in a new year, I mean, these teachers don't know the students well enough to know if there's necessarily a change in behavior, change in how someone's acting or feeling. So that has definitely increased a concern. And not only that, but not being able to socialize. We know that's a behavior of them not necessarily socializing as much and withdrawing and all of that, but not having that opportunity to feeding into some of those negative thoughts. This definitely is a difficult time there's a lot of concern for suicide and depression during this time. I think it's really important. Actually, I just had a conversation with a school that we put the suicide prevention program in place there a couple weeks ago. I had a post meeting with them, and the kids came forward and said, we really want to know more about what's the difference between sadness and depression. They got confused about that. And I think when I asked that question, what's it look like? What does depression look like to you? People a lot of times just think it's just sadness, just someone feeling really down. What depression can actually feel like is a numbness, not feeling anything at all, just not having any energy or desire to do things or be with anyone. Sadness is definitely a part of it, but it's a numbing, it's a self-loathing, it's really focusing on the negative aspects of the world and themselves. There's anxiety, guilt. People that have depression also have guilt that they're not able to do things that they normally would do. Hopelessness, isolation, all of those really play a big part of it. But I want to mention, sadness is a temporary situation. So sadness is a normal thing that everybody has in their lives, and it comes and goes. Unlike depression, where it stays. It's not something that you just get over. It's not like you can just, pick up and do something different and feel better. It's prolonged, and it needs medical attention, just like other medical conditions. Depression is a medical condition. It's the brain. So let's talk about some warning signs. So there's a lot of risk factors that we reviewed, but what are some of the signs that someone might be thinking about suicide? So the warning signs, the risk factors that we're talking about, depression is definitely in there, and one of the biggest ones, but how does that look? We really need to pay attention. Is someone acting differently than usual? That is a key factor, key warning sign for suicide. In particular, if someone's starting to give things away that are important to them, if someone makes contact with you, like they're saying final goodbyes, increasing risky behaviors. Maybe all of a sudden they're driving really recklessly. What if the car goes off the road? I don't really care. Are they using substances, beginning to use them or use them more often? Are they self-injuring? Is there a deep pain that's going on that they're needing to do something about? Again, wanting to be alone all the time, a decrease in interest in activities. Again, sounds a lot like depression, but these are also things that the signs to pay attention to. The important thing is most people who die by suicide actually give some warning signs that they're thinking about it. Not everybody does, and this is never about a guilt thing. If you know someone that's died by suicide, this is why you're coming to this, so you can learn what some of the signs are, some of the risk factors. And there are the people that don't necessarily give the risk factors or warning signs out. It's important to note that with our younger kids, particularly with kids with ADHD, they may not have depression, but they also are at greater risk of suicide just from the ADHD because of the impulsivity. If they're starting to struggle and that comes to mind, they don't have as much of ability to stop themselves from going forward with that. Let's look at another fact. Ambivalence about death is very common among suicidal individuals. Like I said before, they have these thoughts. Most times they don't want death. They just want the pain to stop. So there's this ambivalence, this going back and forth. Knowing that they have a way out sometimes is what motivates them to be able to move forward. So the ambivalence about death, I think one of the important things is we go back to, how do we start to have better suicide prevention? One thing that communities have done is put in some barriers. So we've heard about barriers on bridges that have been done. That actually reduces the number of deaths by suicide. What we know about people that have suicidal thoughts, it's not like they have the suicidal thought and it stays and stays and stays. It's an intermittent issue. So if we take away whatever means they have during that thought, the less likely they are to die by suicide. So with bridges, having that barrier up. There was somebody that died that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he did a documentary on YouTube. And he talked about he was really depressed. And he's like, okay, this is it. I'm going to end it. And he drove over to the bridge, got out of his car, and as he was walking up, he said, if just one person says hello to me, if one person smiles, if he kept on trying to come up with reasons to not actually die by suicide, is that ambivalence. He didn't want to die, but he just couldn't handle that pain that he was going through anymore. Got up there, none of those things happened on the way up, and so he jumped. He actually survived amazingly. And what he said was almost instantly when he jumped, he thought of another thing he could do to combat those thoughts. So us as community members and as in our households, we need to make sure that we are restricting means if we have someone that's in pain in our home.
Laurel, this makes me think about how at OSU, they started putting some barriers on the parking garages because of problems with suicide attempts on campus. And it also makes me think about a couple years ago, the Dublin school community had the author of What Made Maddie Run come in and speak about that book. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's about a girl who committed suicide when she was running at University of Pennsylvania. She was a runner there, I'm sorry. And her suicide involved a parking garage. So, and it just talks about that whole story. It's very much talking about some of the things you're discussing. So I just wanted to throw it out there. I found it to be a really eye-opening read. And if you're newer to the Dublin community, you may not have been involved with that a while ago.
I think this point is really important, that there is this ambivalence. People think if someone's, another myth that's out there is if someone wants to die by suicide, they're going to make it happen. Well, that's not true. But the point is, there are many opportunities where you can get in there and make a difference. And it isn't that they want to die. There's this back and forth. They just can't keep living with the way that they're feeling. So looking at triggering events. So we've looked at warning signs and risk factors. Just because someone has risk factors and there's warning signs doesn't mean that they're going to attempt. What takes someone from actually thinking about suicide to actually attempting suicide? Important piece with this is to remember that not one single thing actually causes someone to die by suicide. Almost always, as I've pretty clearly stated, there's almost always an underlying mental health component to this. And there may be something that takes someone from thinking about it to actually attempting, but it's not going to cause it. So if you think about like the stop signs, those are put there to help us be aware that there could be something going on, but being aware that there could be a car coming the opposite way doesn't mean there's going to be an accident. It means we need to be careful and watch and before you cross that road. So some of the things that events that could happen that could increase the chance or trigger someone to actually attempt suicide. Big ones are relationship issues, you know, whether that's family members, breakups. You know, how many times have you heard on the media that that someone got bullied to death, or that because someone broke up with them, they killed themselves? That's not what happened. There's typically some other thing going on, some mental health condition, some depression, some feeling of hopelessness. Another important one to remember is rejection, whether it's perceived rejection or perceived failure or rejection completely. So if someone is really driven in school and they're an A student and they actually then get like a C on a test, that is something that could be for them a trigger, or they could get kicked off of the football team or the soccer team. Those are things that happen that don't cause them, but it may take them into a place where they don't feel like they can go on. Sudden death of a loved one, suicide of a friend or relative, and then family stressors like divorce, jail, deployment, or financial problems. And you're looking at this with triggering events with COVID. You know, a lot of families are having a lot of struggles with financial problems, or having people in their family die from COVID, or knowing people that in the community that die by COVID. A lot of these things can be triggers, but there are many other factors involved. As I said before, it's not going to cause it. This is the slide that your the one participant actually wrote in about. So youth who talk about killing themselves are likely to attempt suicide than the youth that don't. So we need to pay attention to if someone is actually saying, I want to die by suicide, or I'm going to kill myself. That's a warning sign. That's someone reaching out for help. That's someone saying, I need some attention here. And we never want to ignore it. Some people like, oh, they're just joking, or they put it on social media. They don't really mean it. We need to pay attention every single time. And so if someone's actually saying that, obviously they need some kind of attention, some kind of help. So we always want to check that out every single time. I want to pause here for a minute and actually see if anybody has any other questions or thoughts. I'm going to start to move into kind of what we can do to make a difference. Some of the things that we can do with our kids to help. This is a really great YouTube clip. It's about 3 minutes long. So I'm going to pull that up real quick and we're going to watch it. It comes from the perspective.
Hey, Laurel, we did have a question about causes of depression. What, since that can kind of lead us down this slope towards suicide, what are the things that cause depression?
Well, with depression, some of it can be genetic, like I said, and some can be, a reaction to things that are going on in someone's life. If someone doesn't have the resiliency to be able to manage situations and go on. I mean, what resiliency is being able to handle something that happens and, be able to view how to go forward. So if someone doesn't feel like they can get through something, they're not able to manage what's going on in their lives, feeling like a failure, some of those events can actually lead to depression as well. And, really taking care of our health is a big piece in being able to help with depression. I'm going to get to a slide later about that as well. So this is coming from the perspective of teens about talking to their parents. Can you hear
Just
that?
like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't
Hey,
want
Laurel, you
Yeah.
have to share that screen. So right now we're still seeing your presentation.
All right, thank you. I knew I was forgetting a step.
There you go.
All right, here we go.
Just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed. Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to
I
me.
wish he'd said
I
something
wish I'd said something.
when it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama queen.
You're making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
in your kid's life.
Pretty intense. I absolutely love that clip. And it makes me nervous at the same time because it pretty much makes my job not very useful. They say everything in such a short period of time, right? Very succinct. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen, the other one. Any reactions to that video?
Yeah, we had a reaction that I knew from the video that I had responded wrong. So maybe someone had had this experience and now they feel like they wish they had said something different.
And we don't know until we learn otherwise, right? So that's what the second part that we're going to be talking about now is going to be going into. How do we say things? What do we do? What can we help promote in our child's life to help with this? You know, there's so many myths out there, and this has just started to be a topic of conversation that people are willing to have. And so we have to give ourselves some leeway and start to learn a different way to be with this.
I think there's a couple comments that, you know, I think one thing that I thought, and then I'll go into some of the comments, is that some of those things that the parents might have said that were wrong, I could see saying those easily, like, oh, he's not worth it. Or, you know, I could see that just being a natural thing that you would say thinking you were helping. So I don't think people should beat themselves up about saying the wrong thing, because I think sometimes our instincts of what to say are wrong. So it is good to get exposed to what research supports. Folks have said, you know, in the chat or to me, sometimes it is hard, but we'll do better next time. And it's good to know that we can grow. And then it's hard to accept that our kids were thinking about committing suicide. So that's hard for a parent to think.
Right.
And just know that you're not alone. Other people have been through this.
Yes. And, you know, we, as parents, what do we try to do? We try to fix things, right? So, you know, saying, oh, that boy's not worth it. Well, we're trying to fix it. Oh, you know, there'll be tons of more boys out there for you. That, you know, we're just trying to encourage and not have them worry and learn from our experience. And what we need to do, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, is that we need to actually show them that we care. Let them know that we care. Let them know that we're going to sit with them in that space that's painful and care about it. There'll be a time for problem solving and action, but first and foremost is we need to sit there with them in that pain and let them know and feel our embrace and feel our strength and support around them. So any other comments there that you wanted to bring up?
Just another thing is that I think it is hard as a parent to hear pain from your children. And so just instinctually, you want to almost take that pain away. And I think sometimes the greatest gift you can give to another person that comes to you in pain is hearing it and just, like you're saying, sitting with it. But you want to, I mean, you want to fix it, you want to make it better, but sometimes just helping people understand what feelings they're having can really help them tremendously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They may not even know what kind of feelings they're having. There can be, it's not typically just one feeling going on. There's usually a lot of things, going through their heads and bodies. So
especially with it happening in younger children, they just don't even have the capacity to understand their emotions fully yet. And I feel like I do this on every single PERC presentation, but I'm gonna throw it out there again. There's a great book called Permission to Feel. And I have used that with my own children, helping them understand what they're like. For example, when someone says they're stressed, that's not really a feeling, that's like a reaction. So trying to get back to what is the feeling that underlies that stress. And it's amazing to me how helpful that is. It doesn't seem like it should be as helpful as it is, but just understanding the feelings that they're having seem to really help my children in particular to handle different situations. So I just wanted to recommend that, and I'll stop talking now, Laurel. I'm sorry.
No. It's, you're making some of the points that, I'm going to be bringing up as well. As like, that is important that we actually teach our kids and allow them to have the emotions they're having without judgment on it, without immediately trying to right it. Embrace it and help them understand what's going on. And then that's what builds resiliency, is for them then to be able to take whatever situation they're in and then figure out how to move forward and feel like they can manage a situation. And if they don't manage it well initially, that it's not the end of the world. You can go back and you can figure out a different way to manage it. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you. So talking about protective factors, this leads right into it. Individual characteristics that our kids have. So do they have that really resiliency? Do they know what is special about them? Matt, do you see that? Did something pop up on my screen? Okay, I got a notice. I scared that you guys could see it. That it was covering the screen anyway. So a couple weeks ago when Matt and Libby from Gestalt were here, they talk about self-esteem. And this is one of the important protective factors of kids. So do they have self-esteem? Do they know what is special about them? Not just what they're good at, because that's not self-esteem, that's self-confidence. Self-esteem is someone really knowing what is good and special about them. So, and it's our job as parents to really help them experience it and know it. So if someone's acting goofy, let them see and understand that you find them funny, that, and you let them know, boy, you have such a great sense of humor. Name it, respond to it and name it. If you see someone being kind, name it and tell them how important it is and how wonderful that is in them. So really helping them understand the little aspects of themselves. is going to help build that self-esteem. Another protective factor is family and support systems. So family is, primary protective factor. What are we doing as family? Our kids feel like they can count on us? But also, as our kids grow up and get older, they may not necessarily be coming to us as much. It's a normal part of growing up, is that individuation process and moving more towards friends. So really helping give them some support around, right now, particularly with COVID, how to encourage relationships. And right now, unfortunately, social media may take a bigger role in that, or their phone with, doing some, it's not Zoom, I don't know all the apps that the kids use these days, but FaceTime or different things like that, allowing them that time and space with their friends is really important. They need it to develop and grow. We still need to have parameters around it and rules and guidelines around it. They can't have their phone in their bedroom at night and, keeping them up with the blue light and, interaction and all that kind of stuff. But helping them come up with some ways to positively engage with their support systems is important. We've really gone through restrictions of means quite a bit. But if you have somebody in your home that is depressed and or having suicidal thoughts, safety proofing the house is really important. What if your child has a friend come over that's depressed or suicidal? No matter what, having things in your home put away, locked up, is really important. We start out that way with our kids, don't we? We have everything on a high shelf or not available, non-accessible. Kids, as they grow older, we want to give them more and more responsibility. Things that can harm them is not one of the things that you want to let up on. Getting them mental health care, getting them to a place that they can have treatment, excuse me, and allowing them to get that therapeutic support is a really good protective factor if they are struggling. You don't cause a person to consider killing themselves by talking about suicide. That's the one I was talking about that the participant brought up earlier. And I think the kids in that video did an excellent job demonstrating that, or explaining why that's so. It gives them the chance to get the help that they need. We as parents need to make sure that we are opening that door of communication and letting them know it's okay to talk about whatever it is that they're feeling. And a lot of kids, if they're having suicidal thoughts, they don't want to come forward. They're ashamed, they're fearful, they don't want their parents to worry. There's so many different factors that can really add to a child not coming forward to their parents and letting them know. That's why it's important for us to ask them. 50 to 90% of parents were unaware their child was having suicidal thoughts. 60 to 95% of parents were unaware that suicide attempts happened by their child. That was from some research that's been done. And that's really scary. I want to tell a personal story about that. When my child was, my daughter, she was 14, finishing up in 8th grade, I knew she was having a hard time. She was getting sick a lot. She was getting having a hard time keeping up with her grades or her schoolwork. She just wanted to be by herself all the time. She really didn't like me. So how many of these things are teenage years? And how many things are depression? Being a mental health counselor and having plenty of years of experience in it, I had an idea, okay, so something's going on here. So I got her linked up with a counselor. And it turns out that she had been having suicidal thoughts, that she had been cutting. It was devastating to me that, I didn't know this. I didn't know how to help her, and she wouldn't let me help her. So that's another part of this, is really using the support systems and allowing your child to help you understand who their support systems are. She's finally just now coming back around to me, and she's 20. So she now thinks I'm a nice person again. She likes me again, which is really nice. But there was a long period where she didn't. And so who can we help? In that video, the kids talked about getting a piece of paper out and having your child write down some people that they can reach out to. If they're not going to reach out to us, we need to help them think about who else they can reach out to. It's an important part of being a mature parent adult, is knowing when our child needs something more than us.
Someone had shared in the chat that they had a similar experience to yours, Laurel, and that it really made them feel like a failed mother.
I don't know how many years ago that happened to you, but I'll tell you what, I felt the same way, and it was really hard, even though I know all these things. I mean, this is my work, right? Experiencing that was different. Now, 6 years later, my daughter actually comes to me and talks to me. And in high school, she wouldn't necessarily talk to me about her, but she would come to me and talk to me about her friends. Sorry about my cough here. And knew that I was a responsible person and I could get help. It was just too emotional for her to come to me herself. But we got her the help she needed, and it was an up and down process, and it was really hard. And I'm going to talk more about when she went off to school, kind of thinking some of the concerns I had, and she was launching into the next part of her life.
Yeah, this person said that they're still kind of in the middle of this situation.
Just hold steady. Let them continue to know that you support them and care about them. And really, that's what we have to do as parents, weather some of those storms. Brings me to the next piece here. What's the safety net with our kids? What do we need to do? I felt I was pretty self-aware and competent parent. And learning about the other things that we need to do for our kids is important. We need to know how to reach out for help and who to reach out to. And, whether that's getting them to a therapist, getting them to talk to the church, getting them wherever your family gets that kind of support, and your child feels like they can get help. Don't give up. It took a lot of patience and persistence for me to help my daughter. This goes back to what you were just saying a minute ago, feeling like you're a horrible parent. Can't blame yourself, because what's that going to do? That's only going to then bring you down too. You need to continue to show that they can have whatever feelings they're having and experience what they're experiencing. And it's okay. You're going to be there and you're going to love them no matter what. Self-care. Your child needs self-care, but you need self-care. Knowing the things that you can do to help bring yourself back and be present, because what do we need to do? What's the best thing that we need to do for our kids is be present for them. Be that safety net for them. I'm going to get a mint real quick to help my throat.
Laurel,
Right.
this is like a human technical difficulty that we're experiencing right now.
I mean, tears are considered appropriate during a conversation like this, but not because of the dry throat. By the way, when all that was going on with my daughter, I hadn't asked her, are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you wish you're dead? If I would have asked that earlier when I started seeing some of the signs, she could have answered me. She could have let me know, and I could have gotten her help sooner. So communication is really essential. When we think about our kids growing up, if our kid has a health concern, diabetes, hypertension, whatever it is, whatever it is, letting the school know what's going on is the responsible thing to do in case there's an issue that your child has at school. So we need to let our schools know if our kids are struggling emotionally, mental health issues. And actually signing a release of information for our school to be able to talk with a counselor or a physician or whatever it is, to make sure that they actually have some communication going back and forth as well. When our kids go off to college, so my daughter went to college, I had just had a medical condition, an accident actually, and I wasn't able to really be part of her going off to college very well. Like, I was there, but I wasn't necessarily thinking all the things that I need to do. So I didn't get some of those important things signed, like my ability to see her grades, my ability to interact with people at the school, to make sure that that she's getting the different things that she needs. So when they go to school, go to orientation, sign those releases, sign those things saying both you, because your child and you have to sign it, saying that it's okay, that the school is letting you know on information. Know what kind of mental health services there are at the school and in the community where they're going. So research that. Have the counseling department at the school give you a list of area places. Look it up on the internet yourself, whatever it is. Make sure that your child has that list of trusted adults that they can go to and a list of services that they can engage in if they need it. We can't always count on them telling us, so we need to give them, as they leave our house, we're not going to be able to see them and have as much say over what's going on. So we need to enable them to get that help on their own. And the best thing that we can be doing as they're, growing is making this be something that's not scary to talk about and addressing it when there are issues that come up. So even when our child, if they don't go off to college and they get a job, helping them research what benefits they might have at their job, looking at, what's in the community around you. As kids get older, they may not be able to, if they already seen a therapist, they may not be able to continue on with that therapist because it's an adolescent therapist. At least that's how it is at Children's. Some other community agencies continue to see people into adulthood, but not all of them do. So you just need to always make sure that we're paying attention to that, getting them prepared, giving them the information so they can seek treatment on their own. So we want it to shift from them telling a trusted adult that there's a concern to finding a way to get themselves treatment. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, someone had commented in the chat that they wanted to, I think, to be involved in having this information about their child, but their child won't let them, like, because they're now legally an adult, they're saying, no, you can't look at my medical records. So I guess that provides an additional challenge, but do you have thoughts on that?
And that's what happened when my daughter went off to college. I didn't sign those papers with her there. So I was then not able to actually help get that information. And so part of it is just helping. I've really mended my relationship with my daughter quite a bit. And how I did it was backed off and allowed her to know that I cared, but I wasn't going to try to jump in and problem solve for her or have her feel like I was judging her decisions. I don't know. It's hard once they're already at that place. So really for people with the younger kids, getting in there and talking and communicating early is important. Anything else?
Yeah, we also had a question about thoughts on a gap year for kids. So maybe if they're struggling, does it make sense for them to not go to college right away, but maybe spend a year doing something different? What do you think about that scenario?
Well, that's just, I'm sure there's so many different factors that are going to go into that. I don't really can't answer that one. I think having the open communication and dialogue with your child and kind of helping them think through the pros and cons of that and coming up with some real plans would be important.
And then I've got another comment here that says, you know, this whole idea of being cut off, like your child cutting you off, is why they need another adult they trust. Sometimes they don't want to listen to their parents, which I think we've seen play out time and time again, that I could tell my kids things and then one of their friends will say the same thing and they'll tell me about it like it's some great idea. And it's like, but
Right.
I guess that's the whole point of making sure your kids have those other trusted individuals that they can turn to.
And everyone, has their own ways of doing that. I clearly helped my daughter recognize some of the people, and there are people that are just important in our lives. But I also specifically told her and the friend that what she tells you, you don't have to come and tell me. So letting my daughter know that she could go to a friend, another trusted adult, and tell about things that I may react to in a different way. And that seemed to help her feel freer to go talk to other people. So let's talk just a couple minutes about how to choose a mental health professional. First of all, if someone's struggling, you always want to make sure that there isn't a medical condition that's causing it. So, depression is a medical condition, but it also can be brought on by different factors that are physical problems that can be remedied different ways through medication or different practices. As your child's going off to school, make sure that you know what kind of insurance they have, that they know what kind of insurance they have. Find out the availability of the mental health professional and the type of insurance they take. Do they have a sliding scale? Whatever you need. But sometimes availabilities can really differ from, someone can get you in a week versus some people, it might be a few months. So depending on your needs, check those out, get the name of a few different providers and seek those answers. When you're seeking that out, does that particular provider work with the problems that your child is having? Not everybody specializes in certain areas. So make sure that they feel competent and confident in their abilities to treat what your child is going through. And then after the first appointment or first couple appointments, really help your child think about, is this somebody that's a good fit for them? Do they think they can open up with this person? Can they talk with this person? Sometimes personalities just don't mesh. It doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. So that is another considerable thing to think about. How do we start the conversation with our child about depression or suicide? I think that really the most important thing to think about here is it's okay to not be okay. So holding off on those writing reflexes that we have as parents. But when you point out when you start to have that conversation, you want to address the things that you can actually see, not what you think is going on. So I noticed you just really don't want to leave your room anymore. What's going on? Are you having difficulties with some friends? Or are you having trouble with school? I noticed that you're not eating the way that you used to, or you're eating too much and finding things in your room. You want to pay attention to things that you're actually seeing. You seem really down and you're spending a lot of time alone. I want to be here for you. Can we talk about this? Set up a time where you actually can go do something with them. Boy, I'm falling apart in here. Jeez. With asking them to talk, approaching them, it might not be the right time for them to be able to talk either. So let them know that you're still going to be there. If they don't want to talk in that moment, say, I'm going to be here. I'm in the other room all night. I've got something I'm working on. Feel free to come talk to me whenever you like. Open that door, set up a time where you guys are spending individual time each week together. Hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go get some ice cream. Let's take a drive. Driving is a great place to talk with kids, by the way. You want them to know that they can talk to you about anything. So it can be, bringing up a conversation, whatever they want to talk about, but also letting them know that you're going to be there to be able to talk about the more difficult things as well. I see a comment.
I would say that if you have younger kids that maybe you haven't seen any signs, but you just want to make sure that you're talking about this subject, it can be helpful to just say, hey, I learned that in health class, you're going to talk about signs of suicide. So what do you think about that? Or what have you been learning? Can you tell me what you've been learning? Or if your kids are even younger, maybe they're not in those health classes yet, you can just say, hey, I attended this presentation and we talked about suicide and I learned about some of these myths that you can't talk about suicide, but you actually can, and things like that, just to make those conversations be out there so that your kids know you're not going to freak out if they ever wanted to talk to you about that at some point. I think that can be helpful too.
Absolutely. And that's why I want to reinforce that spending time individually, letting kids talk about whatever it is, as early as you can, the better. The sooner they start to understand that you are someone they can talk to, the better. And so what are some of the things that we should avoid? Well, when we talk about the stigma, it's so big. Stigma about mental health is huge. look at some of these statements. 4 and 5 think it's harder to admit to having a mental health condition rather than any other illness. It's the top ranked stigmatized illness. Let's, just for fun here, let's swap out the word mental illness with diabetes. 1 and 2 are frightened by people with diabetes. Do you think if someone with diabetes felt that way, that, or they're hearing that they're psycho, they're nuts, or whatever it is, that they're going to feel comfortable coming forward and talking? We have, as parents, we need to really pay attention to how we are saying, talking about mental health. And it's so easy to say, oh my gosh, that person acting crazy. You know, I've said it, I say it, I catch myself. I'm like, oh no, I can't say those kind of things. And we just have to be careful, because if our kids think that that's what they're going to be called, that's what they're going to be experiencing, they're not going to want to come forward and talk to us or anybody else about it. So in particular, strengthening connection with your child, set the stage. If you need to talk to them, increase the opportunity. Like I said, go for car rides, go for, make sure you're having some kind of meals together, walks, whatever. Just increase the opportunity for interaction. I know I learned so much when I had my daughter in the car, and I'm not sure if it was because she can just look straight ahead and not have to make eye contact with me or whatever it was, but I heard all kinds of stuff when we were riding in the car. Be willing to talk about these difficult topics. Give them your full attention. My favorite word, and Matt and Libby a couple weeks ago used it as well, is the word curious. We need to be curious with our kids, not do that writing reflex. And sometimes you might have to fake curiosity in order to give yourself a moment to kind of breathe, digest that there's something difficult that you got to talk about here, ask questions, get information. It's amazing. You know, we think we know what's going on, but if we get ask more questions about it, we get more information, and your child feels heard. Be consistent and persistent with communicating and connecting with your child. Show that self-care is important, and show them that you take them seriously and you'll advocate for them when appropriate. So like I said before, getting in touch with the school if there's a problem, if you're concerned about their mental health, if they're being bullied, if whatever it is. There's a difference between a helicopter parent and a parent that is willing to advocate and be there if their child needs some help. What are some things that our kids can do, we can do? This is called free medicine. Watch your nutrition, sleep, and your exercise. They all work together to make the mind and body work the best. And if one of them starts to get off course, like all of a sudden you're not sleeping, are you going to have enough energy to exercise? Actually, when you're sleepy, down, you know, carbs are something that people crave, and then you don't feel like exercising so much. I mean, it's a very intricate system. And so by really trying to keep those in balance as much as possible can actually prevent and treat depression. I've talked a lot about self-care now and then, and everybody has a different form that's right for them. One that I really want to pay attention to today is mindfulness, because I think it comes into play with a lot of these. Mindfulness is being present. Mindfulness is connecting with the here and now, not worrying about what's happened in the past and not focusing on what has to happen in the future. Allowing yourself to come and be present, whether that's through yoga, meditation, taking a walk. I know when I take a walk, I'm very fixated on just kind of like paying attention to the nature around me. But everybody has a different way to manage that. And so some people go out and take a run. Some people like to, play sports. Find one that works for you. Talk with your child about the different things that they find helpful and that can help alleviate some of their stress as well. I talked a little bit about social media. And it is important these days to actually have a connection with social media. Our kids are going to be in it, whether we like it or not. We're actually asking them to be in it right now with school and everything else. It can actually be used for good. We have to still guide our children with this and, monitor what they're actually looking at and doing. But there are a lot of really great places in the internet to actually look and reduce stigma. There's really great sites that show all the celebrities that have struggled with depression and or suicide. It makes it humanizes it. It allows them opportunities to actually engage with people and see different coping mechanisms and strategies that people have used. And there, are places where they can actually get involved with different community, caring communities that can help as well.
Hey, Laurel, I just
Yeah.
wanted to let you know, we are at, I think it's 11:05, just so you know, we're are we moving
We're-
towards wrapping it up?
We're right here. Sorry about that. I can get
No,
started.
it's okay. It's okay. Thank you so much.
So this is, when I talk about resources, this is the last one. This is really important that our kids have these numbers. Crisis text line and the suicide prevention hotline number. Have these numbers in their phone, whether they're going to need them for themselves or a friend of theirs. A lot of times friends will call for their friends, and that's, a really great way to get someone to help too. That's it.
If you have time to stay, if anybody has questions, we can totally leave it open. I didn't want to
Sure.
make you stop abruptly. I just wanted to be cognizant of the time, just
Yeah.
in case people did have to leave.
No problem.
If you have any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute and ask, or if you want to throw them in the chat, that works too. There is a question about how could they reach you if they had a question outside of this conversation.
Feel free to, let's see, how can we do this? If you wanted to contact PERC, and they can give you my email address, or
Do you want me just to type it in the chat
Oh,
here?
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right,
Yeah.
tell me your email address. I don't have it in front of me.
It's Laurel, Laurel, .beaver, BIEVER, at Gmail. At nationwidechildrens.org.
All right, I just sent it out. And then can you please talk more about different professionals that could help, like counselors or medical doctors? One thing I do want to say before you answer that, Laurel, is there was an email that went out from the district, I believe it was last week, and it detailed the mental health resources that are available through the district in a pretty clear way that I thought was really helpful. Like, for example, prior to that, I was not aware that we had not counselors, I knew about those, but we have, I'm blanking on the medical term, but we have resources that I was unaware of that are actually employed by the district that are there just to help people and families that are struggling within our district. So please do.
I would recommend you really look at that list, because it is extensive, and it's actually set out in different levels of care that are needed for, like, if your child struggling a little bit, be able to have touch base when they're at school or if they're having more significant issues where they actually need some counseling services, that can be done, I believe, at school or affiliated with school. And they actually have more of a crisis response team as well, if there is a really high need. Really extensive, amazing list of resources that Dublin has.
Yeah, and I was struggling with the word, but it got provided in the chat, social workers. That's what I was trying to say. We have social workers employed by the district that can help out with kids that are having different types of struggles or issues. All right, well, I don't see anything else popping up in the chat, and I don't see anyone else off of mute. So I think we'll go ahead and conclude. Someone is mentioning Centero and how they are also a wonderful resource. And yeah, they certainly have provided a lot for our district. And in fact, they're a part of the Signs of Suicide curriculum that is, provided by the district in a health class.
Yeah, we worked with Centero about signs of suicide as well. So they're wonderful.
Yep.
Really.
So thanks everyone for being here today. Again, please spread the word. And like I said, this will be posted out on the PERC website once we have a chance to get it all converted over to YouTube. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Laurel.
Thank you.